Welcome everyone to CW Live. I'm Natasha Nicholson, Executive Editor of IABC's magazine, Communication World. And today I'll be talking with Mary-Ellen Hynd. Mary-Ellen is a certified professional co-active coach, and she specializes in coaching mid to senior level professionals. In October, she'll be sharing her insights with IABC in the form of a workshop. And the title of that is Coaching to Develop a Leadership Mindset. Welcome, Mary-Ellen.
Hi, Natasha.
Well, let's start with this simple question. How do you personally define leadership?
Oh, that's a great question to start with. A leader is somebody who people follow willingly. It's not about power, and it's not about their position. Effective leaders need to be visionary, purposeful, responsible, trustworthy, and relational. And that relational piece is really important. It's about, there are three relationships, about having a good understanding and relationship with themselves, with others, and also the system in which they operate. You know, there's a great example that I remember just thinking about this from the IABC World Conference in New York. I believe it was 2008, and Bill Marriott, who was at the time the head of Marriott hotels, was talking about his blog. But as part of the presentation, they showed a video of him visiting one of the sites with a fair number of his employees, and the camera panned over the faces of the employees, and they were smiling, and you really got this true sense of connection and admiration, and a sense that they wanted to be in a relationship and connecting with Mr. Marriott. And then later in his presentation, he commented that he said, "We take care of our employees, and our employees take care of our customers," which is so simple. But if you think too about that following part, that willingly following part, as a leader, the role of the leader is to take your people from where they are to where they haven't been, and it's much easier if they want to follow you, so you can create a team that you can trust to do the job that they need to do.
Do you think our definition or even our expectations of leadership have evolved over the years? And if so, how have they evolved?
Yeah, I think increasingly today there's a real need for accountability of leaders, not just at the top, but throughout the whole organization. And that, unfortunately, comes from a lack of trust with some of the things that have been going on. Effective leaders also need to pay attention not just to the financial bottom line, but also take a socially responsible view. So to consider their the social side, which is their people and their communities, and the environmental side. So a long-term view versus a short-term view of sustainability is one thing. And also, we all know, working in communications, it's a fast-paced world. We're bombarded with all sorts of information daily, and there's a requirement to respond quickly. And at the same time, within companies, we have, with the internal social networks, have really broadened out the hierarchy, giving employees at all levels access and engagement opportunities with senior leaders. So as part of that too, there's an increased requirement for leaders at all levels to have emotional intelligence. And when I say emotional intelligence, I mean a self-awareness and discipline and empathy. If you think about it, we are human beings. We're not human doings, but we forget about that, and especially in companies. And it just runs better if there's a tuning into to those two sides.
Well, let's talk more about that because your approach to leadership development is that it's less about gaining new skills and more about, as you said, looking inward and developing self-awareness. What does that look like? Can you give us some tangible descriptions of what a self-aware leader looks like?
Yeah, sure. So developing a leadership mindset begins with self-awareness. And so you need to have a good sense of yourself. What are your values? Values are really the essence of who we are, like our internal DNA. And those are the things that, that matter the most to us in life, that lead to fulfilling work in life. So that's a really good starting point to build your own self-awareness. And so once you develop that core through that knowledge, then you're able to, when you're faced with a situation, look inward for clarity versus always outward for external validation. And it is a skill that you develop. It doesn't mean that you don't have your outside advisors, but through sort of self-reflection, checking in with yourself, there is a calmness that will come from that. And of course, you need to understand yourself before you're able to effectively deal with others.
Well, in your workshop, you will also be talking about creative versus reactive tendencies. So what do you mean by that? And why is it so important for leaders to understand the difference?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There are two stances in life. So there is the reactive stance, which is where 70% of us go most of the time. And from this stance, this is fear-based, so it's anxiety containing. And when we're operating from here, we're not feeling that there are possibilities. We're sort of drawing back into ourselves. We're feeling powerless and often defensive. And then, the other side is the creative stance, and it's the opposite. It's based on love and passion, and it's energy unleashing. And from this place, you are open to possibilities, and you feel powerful. You don't feel that contained. So the first thing is understanding that there are those two stances. There's a couple of other things going on too. So our brains are social organs, and which means that when they're in a calm, relaxed space, they're going to be open to creative thinking. But when they perceive a threat, they will go into that reactive way of thinking. So without us even, that's just what's happening. That's the way we're put together. So we have that to deal with. And then also, we each of us have our own underlying set of assumptions and beliefs that guide our behavior. So how we feel about ourselves, and also how we feel about others. And this is an automatic, reflex that we tend and go to. And it's different for each of us, but it comes from our life and our experiences, things that happened when we were children, things that happened at school and at work, and it kind of forms this immediate reaction. So it's important to realize that there are those two sides as a leader, because as a leader, where you want to hang out is you want to hang out in that reactive place. I mentioned before we were talking about self-awareness and the importance of becoming self-aware. The other important piece, sort of building on that, is it's also really important to have a sense of, is the way you see yourself the way others see you? I use this great, it's a self-assessment and a 360 tool that I'll be referring to in the workshop series. But it really gives you a way to see, when you're being creative and reactive based on a number of dimensions, and also is the way you see yourself, are other people seeing you in the same way? The good news is that you, the way to combat this reactive stance is by changing the belief structure, which causes you anxiety. And this is actually where it's really helpful to work with a coach, a certified coach who is trained to sort of get at that and move you in, and to support you to move into more of the reactive or the creative stance.
So that's where we want the leaders to get to. That's where leaders should get to, is that creative.
Yes, absolutely.
Are there, would you say, 2 to 3 questions that as a professional people should be asking themselves if they want to develop as a leader? How do we get there?
Yeah. So one great question is, what keeps me up at night? So if you ask yourself that question and see what keeps coming up, because if something keeps coming up, then that's something that you need to devote some attention to. And it very well could be on one of those underlying assumptions and beliefs, something that is holding you and not letting you, holding you in that reactive place and not letting you move forward. So that's one question. Another one is to ask yourself, why do others follow me? And what's interesting about that question is that will give you clues to your values. We have our values which are internal to us, but that's also what draws other people to us. So when we're honoring our or this will point to maybe the values that you need to honor to be a leader so that people will continue to follow you. And just let me think, another question, just building on the creative reactive piece is, so when you're faced with a challenge or some uncertainty, is to pause and ask yourself, how can I be creative versus reactive in this situation? Self-reflection is a very important piece, though, and I like to say there's power in pause. So take that, so pause, self-reflect. If you're being reactive, you will know, you'll feel it in your body. Our bodies don't lie, but the good thing is you start with that self-awareness, and this is when you can go inside to that strong core that you are developing based on your values, but also realize that you're not alone. So maybe a question is, who else needs to be a part of this solution? So you're moving out to others in that strong team you built that can help you.
Well, Mary-Ellen, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of CW Live. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, well, Natasha, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the workshop series. And, you know, I was thinking as I was getting ready to talk to you, I think there'll really be 2 benefits for the people that participate, because not only will there be an opportunity for them to develop, because we're targeting mid-career professionals, but to develop and get some insights into their own leadership. But as we know, as communicators, often we're in that advisory role where we're supporting our leaders in our organizations. And I think having this knowledge will also be helpful just from a coaching standpoint, dealing with people in that situation.
Absolutely. We're excited about the workshop. And to our viewers, you can learn more about Mary-Ellen's leadership workshop just by following the link in the description. And thank you so much for watching.